Hey everybody, welcome to the video. So I'm breaking down the 6-game MLB DFS slate for Friday, April 2nd over on DraftKings, and I'm hoping everyone had a fantastic start to the season for opening day. Even if it wasn't great from a DFS perspective, hopefully you just enjoyed having the games back on TV, because I know I did for sure. Now, I didn't enjoy watching the Indians lose to the Detroit Tigers. As you can see, that is my favorite team, but at least Shane Bieber had another good start, had 12 strikeouts, even though he did have a bit of a rough start when it came to giving up runs, had that early home run to Miggy, but after that, slowed down a bit and still had a pretty strong start. But yeah, I'm just glad baseball is back. I'm sure you guys are as well. And if you find this video helpful in any way possible, please leave a like. And if you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. It really helps me out. I really do appreciate it. And if you want access to my optimizer that has my projections, ownership projections, rankings, cheat sheets, data sheets that you're going to see on the screen, I'll show you guys a preview. But if you want the entire thing, there's a lot more stuff on there as well. Top stacks, cheat sheets, like I mentioned, pretty much everything else in the Discord chat. Link is down below, but I think that's kind of it for the shameless plug. So without further ado, let's dive into today's video. Alright, so as per usual, we'll start with the pitchers, then we'll move on to the bats. And with this being a 6-game slate, not going to be as many players that I want to talk about, so it should be a bit of a shorter video here. As you can see, I only have 3 pitchers I have listed as of right now. Now, when I say as of right now, I am recording this video at around 1 to 2 a.m. the day of, so things can obviously change. I'm going to add more players to my player pool the more I dig into it, but this is just a first look video for the most part because I can't record a video at 5 p.m. when we get all the lineups and then post it because there's just not enough time for that. So this is my early thoughts as of right now, but these are the 3 guys I'm kind of keying in on. So we have 2 SP1s for the most part and then an SP2 that I really like, but we're going to start up top with Trevor Bauer. $10,500 last year's NL Cy Young winner. I mean, he was absolutely amazing on Cincinnati. He's now on the Los Angeles Dodgers, which beefs up their team even more. They won the World Series and they add the NL Cy Young winner. I mean, this team just gets better and better. I know they lost yesterday versus the Colorado Rockies, but I mean, this team over the course of the season is definitely going to rake, and they have great pitching as well. So there's really no holes here. But anyway, getting into Trevor Bauer, it's a good matchup versus the Rockies lineup. I'm not that scared of their lineup, but the problem is he's in Coors Field, and you guys know the inherent risk with Coors Field. They're in the elevation, so the ball's going to travel. We saw Clayton Kershaw, who's a very good pitcher in his zone. I would say as of right now, Trevor Bauer is a better pitcher over Clayton Kershaw. Now in the course of their career, obviously Kershaw, but as of right now, I would give Trevor Bauer the nod there, but it's always just a bit concerning rostering a pitcher, especially at this price point in Coors Field. I checked the weather. It looks like it's going to be about 75 and sunny, so it is some pretty decent hitting conditions for the bats there. So I'm a little bit scared to want to play Trevor Bauer in cash games just because he's in Coors Field. We can get Blake Snell for $800 cheaper, not in Coors Field facing Arizona, who's on a lineup that I'm really too scared of, even though they did score around 7 or 8 runs just yesterday. But getting back to Bauer, the way the pitchers are in this slate, I do think you can make a case for wanting to play Trevor Bauer in cash games. I'm not sure what ownership is going to look like yet. I haven't read my ownership projections yet, but I would say the 2 main SP1s here are going to be Trevor Bauer and Blake Snell. I feel like they're definitely going to be one of the highest zones of the bunches on this entire slate because they just make the most sense. They're the most talented pitchers on this slate, and they are in pretty decent matchups. The problem is Bauer's just in Coors Field, but if he can just start striking these guys out and they don't even make contact, it's not even going to matter. Maybe he gives up a home run or 2. He can give up some power, but I could definitely see him racking up plenty of strikeouts here. And if we actually look at the daily team sheet here for how this current Rockies lineup performed versus righties last year, they were 6th in the league in strikeouts. And there's a lot of guys here that can strike out. McMahon was over 35% K rate versus righties. Trevor Story close to 30%. Charlie Blackmon's not a big strikeout guy, but still around 20%. CJ Cron at 28, Sam Hilliard at 37.3%. Fuentes was pretty low, but overall, I think there can be plenty of strikeouts in this lineup. They were also 21st in WRC plus versus righties, so I do think there's a lot of upside here for Trevor Bauer, even though he's in Coors Field, so I do like him in all formats, even though it is scary rostering a pitcher in that environment. And then dropping down to the other SP1 option on this slate, we have Blake Snell, who's an ace in his own right, and he gets a pretty good matchup here versus the Arizona Diamondbacks, even though they had a very good day yesterday versus Yu Darvish and company, but not really sure we're going to see that happen again. Vegas would agree as well, as they have the lowest implied team total in the slate at 3.39 currently. He's also the largest favorite, and his K-prop's not too far off of Trevor Bauer's. And Blake Snell had a pretty good spring training, didn't give up a single run in around 14.1 innings. His strikeout to walk ratio is pretty good as well, so I can definitely get on some Blake Snell here. His numbers pretty solid, 3.06 xFIP last season, strikeout rate above 30%. Walks are a bit of an issue with Blake Snell, so can his pitch count, but overall, I think he's going to be a pretty solid play here. Not too concerned with the Diamondbacks lineup, even though they did have a strong day. There's a couple guys that can certainly give him some trouble, but I do like this price point quite a bit. And if you want to play Blake Snell over Trevor Bauer because you're scared of Coors Field, I think that's totally warranted, and I wouldn't mind that. And plus, you can save a bit of money to maybe get up to a guy like Mookie Betts or a Cody Bellinger that you couldn't get having Trevor Bauer in your lineup. And I do think that would be worth it if that was the scenario. Not saying it's going to be the guaranteed scenario, but I wouldn't hate that if it came down to it. And then getting into the SP2 options, there wasn't really a lot I liked. I know Ryan Yarborough's there, but he really wasn't too cheap on this slate. There's some other guys you could look at, but Pablo Lopez is a guy that stood out to me at $7,000 because I like using righties versus Tampa Bay. I know they're a good team, but they strike out a ton versus right-handed pitching, and if we pull them up on the daily team sheet here, their current projected lineup has the highest strikeout in the league versus right-handed pitching. As you can see, they're ranked number 1 here. And these guys, they do strike out quite a bit, averaging nearly 30% K rate. Yoshi's at 23. Austin Meadows above 30%. Randy Arozarena, he's close to 40, even though that was a smaller sample size last year. Brandon Lau's close to 30. Yandy Diaz is the only one that's respectable at 10%. That's actually very, very good. But the other guys, 26%, 37%. Mike Zunino, we know he's an absolute strikeout machine. So there's definitely a lot of strikeouts to be had in this line. I'm not saying Pablo Lopez is going to come out here, have 15 strikeouts, and just absolutely win you a tournament. But of all the other SP2 options, he looks the best to me. And I know some of these numbers are going to pop up red, but they're comparing them just to Blake Snell and Trevor Bauer. So it just makes sense that he'll have the third best numbers between those guys. But they're not that bad. He had a 3.73 xFIP, a 25% K rate. The walk rate's a little bit higher than I'd like it to be, but he didn't give up too much power last year. And like I just showed you, I think there's going to be quite a bit of strikeouts to be had in this lineup. So Pablo Lopez at $7,000 in a pitcher-friendly park in Miami, I think you can sign me up for him at only $7,000. I think he makes the most sense of all the cheap options, or cheaper options that we have. I wouldn't say he's super cheap at $7K, but he does fit in your lineup nicely as a nice SP2 option. Doesn't break the bank either, and it should allow you to fit in a couple Coors bats if you'd like to do so. But that's kind of it for the pitching that I like. Like I said, I could add a couple more guys to my player pool as the day progresses, but as of right now, these are the guys that I am liking the most. So I think with that being said, we can move on to the bats now. And as far as the offenses go, we're kind of targeting the same teams once again. You're going to see a lot of Padres on here. You're going to see a lot of Dodgers. And then we'll have some other cheap options from some other teams as well. But for the most part, really do like the Padres and the Dodgers once again. The Dodgers, we'll start with Will Smith. They're still in Coors Field, so I'm not sure why we wouldn't still like them. There's a pitcher downgrade from Marquez to Antonio Sensatella, so I like them even more. Their team total, it's currently sitting at 6.53. Would not be surprised if that rises above 7 by the time game time rolls around, or first pitch, I should say. But Will Smith didn't make the lineup yesterday. Austin Barnes caught for Clayton Kershaw, but assuming Will Smith's in the lineup here, he crushes right-handed pitching, over a 420 WOBA last year, a 350 ISO, a 174 WRC plus, and some overall very, very strong numbers. Sensatella's not a guy that's going to strike out people. The Dodgers are going to make plenty of contact here. Last year, Sensatella only had a 14% K rate and xFIP close to 5. He doesn't really walk guys either, so they're going to get some pitches to hit, and these guys can certainly put the ball over the fence. We're going to have some good hitting conditions. I talked about that earlier when I was talking about Trevor Bauer, that it's supposed to be close to 80 degrees and sunny in this game, so should be prime hitting conditions in Coors Field. Obviously, I would like it to be hotter, like 90-some degrees or close to 100, but it's April. We're not going to get that yet, so I think these temperatures and the weather here is pretty darn good compared to most places in MLB right now. So Will Smith, you can sign me up for him. Plenty of power. He's a lot more expensive than he was yesterday. I want to say he was $4,500. Now he's $5,200, but if you can get to him, I like him. If not, we have a really good value option here in Luis Campusano from the Padres, assuming he can make the lineup here versus Merrill Kelly. Now, we only have a 4-plate sample size from last year, so we can't really use these numbers. In those four plate appearances, he did very well. 1,000 ISO at 337 WRC plus, but again, it's 4 plate appearances, so this means absolutely nothing to me. But if you can't get to the expensive Padres like Manny Machado, Fernando Tatis Jr., and you want some exposure to the Padres, you want cheap exposure to a good team, this is a good place to do it, and there's no better position to spend down on than catcher most days. So I think he's going to be very appealing, assuming he can make the starting lineup here. Dropping down to first base, we have Max Muncy at $5,300. Very expensive, but it's a lefty on righty here in Coors Field, and Max Muncy has plenty of power versus both lefties and righties. Sensatella with that low strikeout rate, he's going to give you pitches to hit, and Max Muncy certainly has the power to put that over the fence, especially in a park like Coors Field. So if you got the money for Muncy, I like him. If not, no big deal. I don't think he's going to be like a must-own have, especially in cash games, because he does hit a little bit lower in the order, but I think he's a fine play nonetheless. Eric Hosmer is a little bit cheaper at $4,800. He went yard yesterday, and he's going to be batting cleanup here versus a righty and Merrill Kelly. And Eric Hosmer's numbers versus righties last season were pretty darn good. As you can see, at a 330 batting average, a WOBA over 400, an ISO close to 270, a 160 WRC plus, and a near 600 slugging with an OPS close to 1,000. So I really like Eric Hosmer there, getting that lefty on righty matchup versus Merrill Kelly. If you want a cheaper option here, he's also available at second base, but it's Wilmer Flores at $3,700. And I always think he's playable versus lefties. Over the course of his career, they've been pretty darn good. And last year, it's only 67 plate appearances, but he did have a WOBA close to 400 and ISO close to 400 as well, in addition to a near 150 WRC plus and over a 660 slugging. A bit of a high strikeout percentage, but I always like Flores versus lefties, and Kikuchi doesn't scare me too much. I know Kikuchi does not have bad numbers versus right-handed bats. If we can pull those up really quick, it's not bad. He did have an ERA close to 5 versus righties, but the xFIP was all the way down to 3.8 with a 25% K rate, but he can struggle with some walks as well, and I still think Flores could win this matchup, so I do like the price point for him, and he's second base eligible, which isn't the best position on this slate. And speaking of second baseman, we can start with Gavin Lux here at $4,100. You know, he hits near the bottom of the order, but it's still just a lefty on righty in Coors Field versus a low strikeout guy in Sensatella. He's going to get pitches to hit, and the price point's not bad. I know he's, like I said, he's sitting lower in the order, so it's never as appealing. I'm not sure if I'd get there in cash games because he's a little bit pricey as well, but runs are going to be scored from the Dodgers in this game unless things really go wrong for the Dodgers here, but I definitely think he's viable versus a righty as a lefty here. Jake Cronenworth, $3,400. This is just getting cheap Padres exposure for the most part. He should be hitting pretty high up in the order because they get the lefty on righty matchup here, and they have a team total above 5, which most teams cannot say on this slate. Pretty much them in the Los Angeles Dodgers. So at $3,400, he hit righties pretty darn well last year, pulling up those splits. Jake Cronenworth hit over a 300 batting average versus them, over a 400 WOBA, close to a 160 WRC plus, and a slugging close to 600 with only a 12% K rate. So he made really good contact versus them. So I really like where he's hitting in the order, and it's a pretty decent matchup. Again, Kelly is not someone I'm really trying to pick on too much, but relative to this slate, he's one of the guys that I guess I am picking on just a little bit, even though I wouldn't normally do that if this was a much larger slate, because I don't think he's that bad of a pitcher. And then rounding out our second baseman, we have Katel Martin at $3,300, who had an awesome day on opening day. He hit a home run and overall just kept hitting the ball every time I refreshed the MLB app. So those of you who ended up having to play him just because Kike Hernandez went out, because it was looking like he was going to be the chalk second baseman, game ended up getting rained out. So I assume most people just pivoted to Katel Martin and probably spent up a few more bucks for an extra outfielder or something like that. But it ended up working out well for you, even though it was a tougher matchup versus Yu Darvish. He ended up having a home run, and overall, very, very strong day. And he's just too good of a hitter for his price point to be this low, in my opinion. I know the matchup versus Blake Snell isn't ideal, and that's why these prices are low. But his numbers versus lefties last year were pretty good. He hit over 420 versus them, had closer to a 500 WOBA, near 200 WRC plus, and only a 7% K rate. So at that price point at $3,300, I know it's a little bit more expensive than it was yesterday, but I mean, just because I like Blake Snell doesn't mean we can't target Katel Martin as a one-off. And now, if you're playing Blake Snell, I probably don't want to get Katel Martin in my lineup. But if you happen to go the Trevor Bauer route, I think that would make sense if you don't get to a guy like Jake Cronenworth or Gavin Lux. So I think Marte's fine for the price point. Maybe he can stay hot for a second day. Then dropping down to third base, we have Manny Machado at $5,700. And again, I'm not like I'm really trying to pick on Merrill Kelly too much. It's not like he's some gas can on the mound. But the way this slate is, I just like the Padres and I like the Dodgers for the most part. They do have the highest totals of Vegas, and they're just really the best hitting teams out there right now. So I like Machado, even though him and Tatis combined to go, 1-10 yesterday with quite a bit of strikeouts. It was a very disappointing performance for them versus lefty Madison Bumgarner, who really struggled versus righties last year. But like I said, that's the variance of baseball. A guy can be in a smash spot and just easily happen to bust, and that's why sometimes makes sense to pivot. Now, they weren't higher owned than Corey Seager and Justin Turner, who were just a little bit cheaper, I believe, or Seager may have been $100 more than Tatis, but I know Turner was a lot cheaper than Manny Machado. He ended up having a better day. It was not like Justin Turner went off or anything, but I know he got a hit or two, and then he had that run. Then he had that issue with the Cody Bellinger home run that ended up not counting as a home run because they on the base paths, which I'm sure if you guys own Cody Bellinger, you're probably punching there for that. That absolutely sucks, and I feel bad for you. But anyway, getting back to Machado, he actually had some pretty good splits versus righties last year. As you can see, some pretty dark green bars here, but 300 batting average, close to a 400 WOBA, close to a 300 ISO. WRC plus was close to 150 as well. Didn't really strike out too much, had a decent walk rate. So I don't mind Machado in tournaments. Not going to get there in cash games, I tell you that, at close to $6,000 because I'd rather just get the Justin Turner at that point for a little bit cheaper, who I think's in a better spot in Coors Field. So anyway, Justin Turner, he's good versus lefties or versus righties. Don't want to sound like a broken record here, but all the Dodgers are in play versus Antonio Sensatella. Don't really see him missing many bats here. I think these guys are going to put the ball in play. It's just a matter if it's going to go foul or stay in, or if it's going to hit a glove, or it's going to go over the fence or find the grass in the outfield. So do like all the Dodgers. And if you want a cheaper option at third base, I personally see myself going with Justin Turner, but if I can't get up to him, Evan Longoria is not a bad option at $3,700. He went yard tonight. I'm not sure how that game ended yet because I started doing some research and recording, so maybe he did something else, but I do know he went yard, and he is going to be facing a lefty here in Kikuchi. Like I mentioned earlier, he's not awful versus righties or anything, but I still think Longoria is certainly in play here versus a lefty who I don't think is the best pitcher out there. He had over a 300 batting average versus lefties last year, 212 ISO, 129 WRC plus. I know these numbers are showing up yellow and orange. Got to keep in mind these Campusano numbers are really making everything else look a lot worse. Like if I just deleted this right now, these numbers would look a little bit better. Yeah, like Katel Martin's numbers went really bright green, and some other guys as well. So don't let it sway you off a little bit. It's just because that sample size is so small compared to the other guys. But yeah, Longoria, I mean, he's got fine splits versus lefties, so I think he makes some sense. And then dropping down to shortstop, the two obvious guys are Tatis and Seager. These are two of some of the best players in the league. I personally prefer Seager over Tatis, and really I would say Corey Seager is kind of my favorite play on these sites. I'd say he's my favorite spend up, even over Mookie Betts. Now, he's kind of a toss-up with Cody Bellinger, but he does hit a little bit higher in the order, and I just feel like I can just trust Corey Seager a little bit more. Tatis is a very similar play to Manny Machado, so I guess I'll kind of save you the rundown on Tatis. Everything I said for Machado can kind of be applied to Tatis here. Tatis had very strong numbers versus righties last season, actually better than he had versus lefties, but you guys can see the numbers. They speak for themselves. I don't want to make this a number bore fest. You get it. Tatis is a great player. It's just I do prefer Seager. I think he's in the overall better spot. He crushed right-handed pitching last season. His numbers were actually very similar to Tatis here, as you can see as well, but it was only 2 points higher. He did have a better batting average, but their ISOs were pretty similar. The WRC pluses were similar. Slugging were very similar. I mean, these guys had some very, very similar numbers in a lot of categories. They both were really good in StatCast in terms of hard hit percentage and barrels. But yeah, Corey Seager, I would say, is if I had to pick one guy in the slate to roster, it would be Corey Seager, in my opinion, even if you just didn't factor in salary. Like, if there was no salaries and you just told me I want one guy in the slate, I'm probably picking Corey Seager. I'd say he's a core play for me. And then if you want to go cheap at shortstop, which I don't typically do, I've been spending it for shortstop a lot, I've noticed, especially since last year, because there's just so many good shortstops in the league right now. When you got Lindor, Tatis, Seager, Xander Bogaerts, Trevor Story, it's just a loaded position these days. A lot of good young guys. It's a very exciting position, but Dubon here at $2,700, I don't think he's a bad option here versus the lefties. His numbers last year, not a ton of power, only a 136 ISO versus lefties, but a very good batting average. A pretty good WOBA, over a 400 on base percentage, and at his price point, you're not really hunting home run. You're just trying to get a guy that can get on base, maybe get a run or two, and he can certainly do that at $2,700. So I do like the value that you get for Dubon there. And then going down to the outfield, we have 3 straight Los Angeles Dodgers here, so you guys get the idea. I like all the Dodgers in Coors Field. Now, obviously, Mookie Betts and Cody Bellinger, they're a step above A.J. Pollock for me. He didn't even make the lineup yesterday, but if he makes it again, I think he's fine below 5K, but I do feel like he's a bit overpriced versus a righty. I do prefer him versus lefties, but Mookie Betts, he crushed right-handed pitching last year. He actually sucked versus lefties, but versus righties, some of the best numbers in the league. A WOBA over 430, a nice batting average, which is not something I really look into too much, but it is nice to look at the batting averages. But a 354 ISO, 181 WRC plus, and close to a 700 slugging and only a 12% K rate. Pair that up with a guy that doesn't really strike out too many bats. Mookie Betts is going to put the ball in play, and I do think there's a very strong chance that he could put one over the fence. So I'd really say Mookie Betts, Corey Seager, those are like your 2 top plays on the side. I realize they're very, very expensive, but if you have the money for them, those are the guys I want to get to over guys like Tatis or Machado on this slate. Cody Bellinger, he really got robbed of a home run yesterday because of the Justin Turner fiasco, so I do feel bad for the Bellinger owners because he definitely deserved that home run. It went over the fence. I believe it was Tapia that tried to catch it, went out of his glove, and it was a home run, but they crossed in the base paths, which is against the rules, so I mean, you can't really complain too much, but I totally understand if you do want to complain, but his numbers versus righties, obviously they're good. He's got plenty of power versus them. He's a little bit cheaper than Mookie Betts, $500 cheaper. So if you have to go down from Mookie to Cody Bellinger, I really don't think it's that big of a deal because of that price discount. Then Pollock already hit on. I feel like he's a bit overpriced. I prefer him versus lefties, but if he makes the lineup, he's in play just because it's Coors Field and he's on the best offense on the entire slate. And then getting into the value options, we have Austin Slater at $3,500. He actually went yard last night, or I guess tonight. Well, yeah, I guess it is last night now. It's now close to 3 a.m. that I'm recording this. But yeah, Austin Slater's totally in play. I always like him versus lefties as a cheap option. Doesn't really strike out too much. Knows how to get on base. Had a .316 batting average versus lefties last year. Close to a 500 WOBA and a 200 WRC+, which again, doesn't look very bright green because of those numbers that we talked about earlier up top that are weighing them down. But they would show up pretty bright green if those weren't there. Only a 10% K rate and over a 22% walk rate. I know it's only a 49 plate appearance sample size, but still very good numbers when he was out there versus lefties. And so I like Austin Slater at that price point. And Kikuchi, not a guy that scares me an awful ton. And then right about Tapia at $3,200 should be leading off here versus a righty. Now the problem is that righty is Trevor Bauer, so it's not like I'm really wanting to go on my way to play Tapia, but it's still Coors Field. And Bauer can give some power to lefties and a lot of fly balls. If there was ever a place for those fly balls to get him in trouble, it would be Coors Field here. So I like the price point on Tapia, and he knows how to get on base as well. Versus righties over a 300 batting average. Not a power guy at all. .07 ISO versus righties last season, but at 361 on base percentage, doesn't really strike out a whole lot either. Gets a lot of ground balls though, near 60% ground ball rate compared to a 20% fly ball rate, but I still think Tapia is in play because of the price point and where he's hitting. And then if you want to go absolute dumpster diving here, we have Taylor Trammell, I'm sorry, however you say his last name. He's only $2,200 and we get a lefty on righty matchup here versus Johnny Cueto, and I do like lefties versus Johnny Cueto. Last year, his splits, he had a 4.45 xFIP versus lefties, a 12.5% walk rate, gave a 265 batting average, a 436 slugging, a 347 WOBA, and a 360 on base percentage. So I definitely think he is in play because of that dirt cheap price point. Also want to say he had an RBI tonight. I was watching the game, and I remember him doing something. I forget exactly what it was, but he did get a hit, and I think he might have got an RBI as well. If he did it at $2,200, I would not complain that much. Then Andrew Vaughn at $2,000. We know he's certainly got some potential, and he's the bare minimum at $2,000, and we get that righty on lefty matchup versus Andrew Heaney. Now Heaney is a guy who had some slight interest in it. I almost put him in the pitcher sheet column that we were going to talk about, but I ended up not doing it because I wasn't fully confident in it because he can get strikeouts. The problem is he gets a lot of fly balls, which can get him to some trouble, gives up a lot of hard contact as well. If you want to look at his overall numbers, he does have a near 40% fly ball rate, a very low ground ball rate at 39%, and close to a 40% hard contact rate as well, which is only the highest of all the pitchers that we've talked about so far, other than Merrill Kelly. So Andrew Vaughn at only $2,000, the bare minimum. If you need to dig that low to get in guys like Mookie Betts, Corey Seager, Trevor Bauer, or Blake Snell on the slate, I think it's totally fine. Is it my first choice? No, but I do think he's viable because of that dirt cheap bare minimum price point. And with that being said, guys, I think that's going to be it for the video. So if you found it helpful in any way possible, please leave a like. And if you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. Get us close to 8,000 subscribers. When I say us, I guess I mean me. So if you want to give me to 8K subscribers, help me out there. And if you want to support the channel over on Patreon, link is down below for that. If you want access to the projections, the optimizer, which you can do team stacks on, 150 lineups. It's got my ownership projections in there, my projections as well. So go willy-nilly on it. You can do anything you want. And you can build player groups as well. And you can join the Discord chat as well, where we talk all day and have a really good time. Very active Discord, so always a good time in there. But I think that's going to be it, guys. If you don't follow me on social media, you can do that. But I'll see you guys in the next video, and I hope you enjoy the next slate of baseball that we have.